This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. As we begin our 16th year of White Plains Week, with my partner, the anchor for all seasons, Peter Katz, and our other colleague, Jim Benneroff, is on assignment tonight. And now, the headlines. Elizabeth Schallenberger, former chair of the White Plains Democratic City Committee, is sworn in as city judge. We will have a new Trump and transition segment with Peter Katz handling the commentary. Westchester County announces a gun show, and the legislators' Democrats challenge Mr. Robert Astorino on that issue. The Common Council voted to eliminate organic manufacturing in certain nurseries in neighborhoods around the city. The council approved the Westmoreland Avenue apartments. A January 18th hearing date was set for the Common Council to consider a community residence which would be run by the Institute of Applied Human Dynamics. Governor Cuomo wants to build a new $10 billion J.F. Kennedy terminal complex and also tells us the cost of repealing the Affordable Care Act to New York State and specifically Westchester. Well, now, Peter, it's time to go to the Rollo Newsreel March of Time. 2017 began with a full house of Democrats Monday evening. New York Assemblyman David Buchwald on the left was there, shown speaking with Assemblywoman Amy Paulin, and in the deep background there is State Senator George Latimer.
That, of course, is at the Common Council chamber,
That's right,
where the first formal meeting of the council for the new year was held. Everyone there was still on somewhat of a high. If they had been at the White Plains New Year's Eve celebration downtown,
yes,
the center of focus at the corner of Main and Mamaroneck, the city again this year claimed to have had 25,000 people there.
Right.
Some people who tried to do actual counts couldn't quite come up with 25,000 from what I hear.
It's like the economy numbers.
But anyway, the city seemed to start off on a bit of a high note, especially at the Common Council chamber.
Yeah, even Pauline Oliva, shown seated in the center, former councilwoman, was out for the festivities, and they were there for the swearing in of Elizabeth Schallenberger as the new city judge right there. And that was the swear-in moment taken off the Common Council feed.
Now, she has been the chairwoman of the Democratic City Committee for many years. And, of course, to become a judge, she really can't be involved deeply in politics, certainly on a regular basis. Certainly cannot continue serving. The question will be, of course, who is going to replace her?
Yes, who do you think it will be? My betting is on Paul Schwartz.
There are some, such as Mr. Schwartz, who have been active in Democratic politics in the city for many, many years, and to me, he would be a leading candidate. But there are also some others in the ranks of the district leaders who have been quite active and involved in civic affairs. And you would think that they would want to pick someone who has deep roots in the city, not just a political hack, to use a cliche.
steadying hand, perhaps. Yeah. Right. And speaking of appointments, Peter, we had a lot of them the last 2 weeks. And here to update us on our ongoing feature, Trump in Transition, with 14 days to go before President-elect Trump becomes President Trump, is Peter Katz.
Yeah, just one more thing that we do need to say about the swearing in was that Joanne Freya, who has served something like 20 years now as a city judge, begins her third term as city judge.
Okay, and now the segment you've all been waiting for.
Indeed, Trump in Transition. And the transition to the White House for Donald J. Trump gets closer and closer and closer. In fact, today, Friday, December 6th, when we're recording this program, this is the day that the results of the Electoral College in the presidential election are certified in a joint session of Congress held on Capitol Hill, with the results being read to the Senate by Vice President Joe Biden. Now, Trump won the electoral vote, as we all know, even though Clinton beat him by almost 3 million votes in the popular voting. President-elect Trump says he will hold a news conference on January 11th, but it's supposed to be a general news conference, not the specific one he promised a few weeks ago, but has not held, to explain how he would eliminate business conflicts of interest once he is in office. Now, the Wall Street Journal, which, as we know, is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox News, who is somewhat a Republican conservative. I think that's an understatement. They have come out with some brand new, hitherto unknown information about Donald Trump's financial involvements and potential business conflicts, and it seems that, according to the Wall Street Journal, more than 150 financial institutions hold debt from Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. That means he owes them money. Now, the newspaper says the process of converting debt into bonds, which are then supposedly to be paid off by Trump and the Trump Organization, has been used for more than $1 billion worth of Trump debt. Back in May, Trump released a financial disclosure form which showed that he owed $315 million. Quite a difference between $315 million
Sounds
and
like
$1
county finances,
billion.
doesn't it? Yeah.
Among the companies listed as holders of Trump debt are Vanguard, a financial company to which he owes $225 million, and the big bank Wells Fargo.
Oh,
now, Wells Fargo has been investigated by the Justice Department and the Securities and Exchange Commission. And as we know, there was the scandal where it turned out that Wells Fargo had created phony accounts in the names of its customers, both bank accounts and credit card accounts. And Wells Fargo has been under investigation for that, and they face federal fines as a result of that. It turns out that Trump will be putting people in charge of the various departments which have been investigating Wells Fargo.
And it could be
a conflict of interest, perhaps.
Fox is looking over the hens.
Trump failed to make good on his promise to tell us on Tuesday or Wednesday of this past week what he knows that no one else knows, that proves the Russians were not behind the hacking to influence the election. Friday, Trump was due to get an intelligence briefing about the hacking. Former CIA Director James Woolsey, who had been intelligence advisor on the Trump transition team, abruptly quit last night. There was a Senate hearing yesterday, Thursday, where members of the country's intelligence community disclosed a lot of what they know about the hacking and the evidence which makes it clear that Russia was behind it. The testimony left no doubt that only one person could have authorized the hacking, Vladimir Putin. While Trump and Fox News commentator Sean Hannity have been praising WikiLeaks' Julian Assange, with Trump saying he believes Assange more than he believes the Central Intelligence Agency. CNN learned last night that the Russians used a third party for delivering the hacked emails and fake news stories to WikiLeaks. So the Russians and WikiLeaks founder Assange could deny that the Russians delivered the material. See how that works?
Yes.
It was reported by NBC News last night that they learned there was a celebration in the Kremlin when the result became clear on election night. Also reported by NBC, Trump is going to ask Congress to appropriate the money so we can pay to build the wall between the U.S. and Mexico, which is not at all what he kept promising over and over again during the campaign.
Somebody's going to get a big contract.
Keith Kellogg will be named Executive Secretary of the National Security Council. Following Kellogg's retirement from the military, he joined Oracle Corporation as an advisor to its Homeland Security Division. Andrew P. Bremberg will become director of the Domestic Policy Council. He was the leader in Trump's transition team for Health and Human Services. Brumberg, get this, currently works for Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell. He's also worked for Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Thomas P. Bossert will be Homeland Security Advisor. He served as Deputy Homeland Security Advisor to President George W. Bush. Bill Stepien has been named White House Political Director. Remember that name, Stepien. Stepien managed both of Governor Chris Christie's gubernatorial campaigns and served as Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Christie. But he was fired by Governor Christie. Christie said he lost confidence in Stepien's judgment. Stepien worked for the 2016 Donald Trump presidential campaign right after he was fired by Chris Christie. In the trial in September about the George Washington Bridge lane closures, remember that? Yeah. Federal prosecution witness David Wildstein said that Stepien was aware of the closures as they were happening. Special representative for international negotiations will be Jason Greenblatt. He is executive vice president and chief legal officer to Donald Trump and the Trump Organization and has been Trump's advisor on Israel. Donald F. McGahn will be White House counsel. He's a former member of the United States Federal Election Commission and was chief counsel for the National Republican Congressional Committee. Republican Congressman Mick Mulvaney will be director of Office of Management and Budget. He is from South Carolina. Mulvaney endorsed Rand Paul for president. Mm-hmm. If you're worried that the Trump campaign promises not to cut Medicare and Medicaid were lies, you may have good cause for more worry. Seema Verma will be appointed administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. She has been a health policy consultant. She was the architect of the Healthy Indiana Plan. Isn't our new vice president from Indiana?
Yes.
The Healthy Indiana Plan was targeted to people with low incomes. It requires the participants to pay into a health savings account. And it has very high deductibles when you get sick.
Yeah, isn't that what they don't like, Peter?
Verna was quoted as saying, you have to make your contributions every month with a 60-day grace period. If you don't make the premium contributions, you're out of the program for 12 months. Now, do you think low-income people can make the contributions, or were they thrown out of the program? The program also removed preventive care for low-income people. In 2014, it was reported by a newspaper, the Indianapolis Star, that while her company was awarded a $3.5 million state contract total from Indiana, she also was working for Hewlett-Packard to the tune of $1 million a year, while Hewlett-Packard was one of Indiana's largest Medicaid vendors and was receiving $500 million in state contracts. And you thought Hewlett-Packard only made computers. A couple of weeks ago, I reported that people in Manhattan were alarmed by a military airplane flying around at low altitude, which turned out to be some sort of Secret Service mission. I have since learned that there actually was a Secret Service mission regarding how to airlift Trump out of Trump Tower and Manhattan in event of an emergency.
without dropping him.
Yeah,
Yes,
I could have
right.
told them they really don't need an airlift. Just call Uber, point the car towards the George Washington
Right.
Bridge. But first, be sure that Chris Christie's folks haven't closed any of the lanes on the bridge.
Oh, I think we're really punishing Christie too much on that issue, don't you?
And last, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, in an interview this week, said that the Democrats had methods to block a Trump Supreme Court nominee and would keep the current seat vacated by the death of Justice Scalia empty, assuming Trump tries to appoint a far right-wing radical whose agenda would be to take away civil rights and do the kinds of things which have helped dictators take and keep control of societies. Trump reacted, as you might guess, with a tweet in which he called Schumer a clown, his word. Some think that the tweet did not reflect well on Trump, not only because Schumer has been productive in Washington and is well respected on both sides of the aisle, in the House and the Senate, as long as he's been there, but because everyone who's ever been to a circus has seen for themselves that the clowns have orange hair.
Thank you, Peter. And that is really, as every week I say, it is really a public service to detail all this. It's like a serial complete, and make of it what you will. It always deserves a moment of silence. But speaking of moments, the last week of the old year and the new year were not without the 2017 First Shocker of the Week. And that was a few weeks ago. County Executive Astorino announced a gun show for the county center.
Right. They had been there in the past. There was obviously controversy about gun control issues and gun shows. But now Astorino has decided to go ahead and allow it to happen, and so it's been scheduled. Right. January 26th, I believe, is the scheduled date.
And the county legislature Democrat caucus objected to this show and has decided to try and ban it. And
well, Monday there is a meeting of the legislators scheduled,
right?
And it will be on the agenda. They would be expected to pass a ban on gun shows at any county-owned property. Yeah. And obviously the county center is a county-owned property. After they pass that, then, if my understanding is correct, Astorino could veto the measure. Right. And he would have 10 days in which to veto it.
Which come up very close to where the
show is scheduled to take place. So if he holds out and doesn't veto it until the very last day, then that doesn't leave the legislature too much time to assemble what they need to assemble in order to take a vote to try to override.
Yes, but they'll have to pay the promoters.
You have a problem. You know, anytime you sign a contract and then you try to get out of the contract or not fulfill and say you can't come in here and put on your show,
yes, because
you may have some legal liability there, depending upon how the contract is written.
There has to be some compromise worked out, perhaps. And in fact, Peter, do you know how many gun shows are held in New York State?
No, I don't.
In January, this month, around the state, there are 11 shows. Okay. In February, there are 9. In March, there are 6. April, 3. 2 in May, and 9 the rest of the year. 40 gun shows in all. This is big money. It's a big hobby. There's a big interest.
And it's a big political issue. Now, if you were, let's say, a Republican county executive and you wanted to run for governor of New York State, and you wanted to be sure that you would pull voters in upstate, which is largely Republican, and where guns are much more commonplace than they may be in Westchester, where hunting can be a way of life in some communities in upstate New York, you, of course, would want to show that you support the NRA, you support the views of hunters, you are a pro-gun person, and so you might want to have a gun show take place at one of your county facilities. Of course, that's just if you were a fellow who wanted to run for governor and wanted to attract votes from Republican areas and gun areas upstate.
Right. Now, in another piece of action Monday evening. The Common Council passed a new ordinance prohibiting organic manufacturing such as soil reclaiming, breaking up rocks into gravel, and certain noisy and truck-heavy usages that have long been said to be a nuisance to neighbors owning homes adjacent to certain nurseries in White Plains.
Actually, it doesn't quite prohibit it. What it does do is it legalizes it. It brings it into the mainstream of the codes in White Plains, and by doing so, it allows it to be regulated. And the intent here is to basically, over a period of years, phase out this type of organic manufacturing operation, the grinding down tree stumps, crushing rocks, things of that nature.
Right,
to
making mulch,
create materials,
stuff
making
like
mulch,
that.
and so forth.
This was challenged, approving this, by Dennis Crolian. And Mr. Crolian...
Well, he was the only council person to vote against it.
Right. And he argued with the mayor that the legislation was almost certain to result in litigation from the affected businesses. He also said he saw no reason to give the nurseries 5 years to get out of the organic manufacturing activities. The mayor replied that the legislation has been considered for some 6 months and there was no need to delay it any longer. Crolian also read an offer received by the city from one of the nurseries affected, offering to execute for the city its recycling activities in the Gedney landfill.
Yeah,
for
basically it's
$14,000
a Modios, or a division of a Modios, another entity, which proposed coming in, taking over the operation at Gedney, paying the city a fee of $2,000 a month to run this, doing all of the work that the city now does, and providing free materials, free soil that's created to the city and to city residents. There was some discussion about this back and forth, and a couple of the Common Council people, most notably Crolian and also Milagros Lacona, complained that they essentially just learned about this offer
that afternoon
that had been made by the Emodio folks.
Plus ça change, plus ça même chose, which is Proust. For the more things change, the more they remain the same. The surprise document being delivered just hours before you're supposed to vote on something. Now, James Kilpatrick pointed out that the reason the 5 years to transition out of the organic manufacturing piece was that this was a condition approved by a court decision involving Buffalo that was sustained and allowed a similar ordinance to stand. You can see the lively exchange on the rebroadcast of the Common Council meeting on the city website. The Common Council approved the Westmoreland Project Apartments project on the former Swackheimer site. Here is a rendering of that proposed apartment building that is now going to be built, and that is the mayor said that he was really excited about this because this was his vision of exactly the kind of project he envisioned when he said he thought of changing the zoning for the Westmoreland Avenue Light Industrial District to mixed use.
Well, there already is a former industrial building being converted as we speak into a loft-like apartments. The question that some have raised about this whole thing is that if you get rid of the light industrial area, where are you going to have light industrial activity in your city? Just how much of the city should be converted to residence? If, as we know, throughout the country, we keep hearing for a call for manufacturing jobs to return to the United States. Well, if you don't have any place in your city where you can put light industrial, where you can put warehousing, where you can put the kind of heavy-duty activity, which certainly is not residential use and certainly not retail use, where are you going to put it?
You can always dump it out on the expressway
to residential
office parks, which are emptying. Now, the council passed a law providing a rebate of taxes for rehabilitation and alteration of historic properties, but just on the amount of money spent on the actual rehabbing.
Right. We had discussed that previously on this show, and it's not a great boon. It's not a great encouragement necessarily to rehabbing a historic site, but nonetheless it does help ease the burden on people who do make an investment to keep the historic character.
Yeah, well, my house was built in 1942, and it's sort of a throwback to housing of the past. And I think I'm going to apply for a historical landmark.
I don't think so. No, it doesn't quite qualify.
Darn.
No.
I thought I had something there. The council adjourned the public hearings on the new apartments proposed for DeKalb Avenue and conveyance of city property to build them. The council set January 18th as the date for a public hearing on the Institute of Applied Human Dynamics to establish a community residence at 22 New York Avenue South. That's the house, upper left corner, and that's the location.
Now, there's been fairly little information provided as to just what it would be, whether it would be a traditional group home, whether there would be some activity related to children going on in there, whether it would be used for research. We just don't have very much information. The organization which is proposing this is a very active, very large organization which does various things, as the name implies. It's a pretty fancy scientific-sounding name.
Yeah. At the beginning of the meeting, Michael Hunter was awarded the Youth of the Year Award. He is a sophomore at White Plains High School and has a wonderful record of achievement at the school and has visited China as part of his studies. Congratulations to him for a great start. The council also approved spending $4,227,000 to finance the costs of acquisition and installation of LED streetlights throughout the city to give White Plains some light.
It's a deal with the New York Power Authority. Now, if you remember, the former Commissioner of Public Works, Bud Nicoletti, has been trying to phase in LED lighting on a low-cost basis without having to spend millions of dollars all at once. By when a bulb burns out, you replace it with an LED.
Right. But now they're going to do it all at once. Right. It also approved a grant from the New York Empire State Development Corporation to accept $490,000 to promote tourism in the city of White Plains. And we have lots of ideas, but we'll talk about them in a future show. And now, the Governor Cuomo, not to be outdone, announced plans for a $10 billion reconstruction of the JFK Air Terminal complex. The design.
They're already working on rebuilding LaGuardia Airport.
Yes.
Right.
And and the next one shows the terminal overview, and the five blue
air gate areas.
Yes, are the terminals that are going to be revised. And the governor also said that the Van Wyck Expressway and notoriously congested Kew Gardens interchange and all are going to be redone, and there's going to be a one-seat ride on the AirTran from Manhattan. He already has $4 billion committed and private financing interested. And that's all the time we have. John Bailey, Peter Katz, Jim Benaroff. Good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.